A huge thank you to Chocolate Hat and Holy Kool-Aid for their generous assistance with this video. If you're somehow not already aware of them, please find links to their channels in the description box. I'd tell you to subscribe to them, but I already know you will. Also, here's a disclaimer. And now let's get on with the show. In a video called 4 Historical Facts That Prove Jesus Rose from the Dead, some Christians make the case for the resurrection by assuming things in the Bible are true, then demanding scholars account for them by saying things like,
and that Joseph singles out Jesus among the trio of men that had been crucified for special care by giving him an honorable burial in a tomb. This is extraordinary and requires some sort of explanation.
If we believe that it is true that they denied, deserted, and betrayed Jesus, that they had given him up for lost when he died on the cross, psychologically, something significant had to have happened to change all of their minds about this particular issue.
The third fundamental fact that any responsible historical hypothesis has to account for in explaining the fate of Jesus of Nazareth is the fact that after his death, different individuals and groups of people claim to have seen Jesus of Nazareth alive from the dead.
But imagine an alternative universe, a cartoon universe, if you will, in which a different religion rose to prominence in the West. And imagine they made these same arguments for their holy scripture. Well, imagine no more, because you're about to see this shit go down. On today's program, 4 historical facts that prove Patroclus' ghost appeared to Achilles. How could a tiny, insignificant Greek civilization end up driving the entire course of Western culture? It's pretty unintuitive, right? And that obviously means that something supernatural had to have happened. So watch in awe as some academic-looking people explain why this is the case.
There are 4 fundamental historical facts which any credible historian must account for if he's to give a tenable historical hypothesis about the fate of Patroclus. The first of these is Patroclus' death, funeral, and burial. Second is his post-mortem appearance to Achilles. Third would be the return of Hector's body to Priam, and fourth is the widespread belief in all these events.
In the last few centuries BCE, you have this loose collection of tiny city-states scattered across a rugged Mediterranean peninsula. But within a relatively short period, the Greeks came to absolutely dominate Western culture. If you ask followers of Zeus why this is, they'll tell you this was because all the miracles of the Iliad and the Odyssey actually happened. So let's talk about this as if it's a real thing.
Patroclus' death is one of the best attested events in the history of humankind. Literally thousands of Trojan and Achaean soldiers saw the dead body of Patroclus in person, and many of them spent the better part of a day yanking it back and forth across the battlefield. So the case for his death is pretty much open and shut. I guess as long as you assume this part of the story to begin with. Oh, did the mic pick that up? But the thing is, we don't have to assume, right? I mean, the Iliad's account of Patroclus' death has to be accurate, since it correctly portrays Greek burial rituals.
The Iliad describes Patroclus' funeral in painstaking detail, including the construction of the burial mound, the burning of the body, and the ritual sacrifice of animals. All these details accurately reflect historical Greek burial practices, so we know the Iliad has to be describing the actual burial of an actual person, because the only alternative is that it's a cultural document written by people who knew how Greek burials worked and drew on this common knowledge to help them embellish a popular legend. And that would be ridiculous.
Most scholars of Greek literature firmly believe that Patroclus really did receive a burial by Achilles, as described in the Iliad.
Could this be because fundamentalists are the ones who devote their careers to studying the Iliad?
No, it's because they're smart, and that means the Iliad is real.
Yes, it does. Because if there's one thing fundamentalists can appreciate, it's an academic consensus. That's why they all believe in evolution. One of the biggest things critics have to account for is the well-documented appearance of Patroclus' ghost. To explain this away, critics have had to come up with several alternative theories.
The first of these is the swoon theory, which says that Patroclus never actually died, but he just lost consciousness during his charge on Troy. But this idea is plainly ridiculous. Patroclus was struck by a god, then he was stabbed in the back by Euphorbus, before Hector drove a spear deep into his stomach. And the idea that any human body could survive such abuse is plainly absurd. Then we have the dress-up theory, which posits the obviously silly notion that one of the Myrmidons disguised themselves as Patroclus and pretended to be his ghost. But Achilles would have obviously known the difference between his lifelong friend and a soldier wearing his armor. In fact, the earliest accounts describe the ghost as looking exactly like Patroclus in all respects, including his appearance and voice. This plainly discounts the possibility of another man dressing up to look like him. And finally, there's the hallucination theory, which states that Patroclus was just, well, a hallucination. But this is stupid. Achilles was super smart and the son of a goddess, not the kind of person who's going to go around hallucinating. In addition, the ghost would have been clearly visible to the Achaeans, who were with Achilles and immediately joined him in the morning after the ghost disappeared. Oh, and Odysseus saw Patroclus' ghost in the Odyssey as well, and I haven't met a scholar in my life who would try telling me that the smartest of all the Achaeans hallucinated.
But why would critics say any of that stuff to begin with? Wouldn't they just say the Iliad's fiction and be done with it?
No, of course not. Whenever critics argue that an account isn't true, they always build their argument on details from within that account.
There you have it, folks. Our resident expert put his own alternative theories into critics' mouths, then eliminated them all by explaining that they're ridiculous. Which leaves us only with a possibility that Patroclus' ghost actually did appear to Achilles as explained in the Iliad. This classical argument is called an argument from Igner. I don't remember, but I know that it clearly proves stuff by process of elimination.
What the Iliad says is that Hector's body was given to his father by this figure Achilles, who out of nowhere and contrary to expectation allows Hector an honorable burial with his family. Moreover, Homer tells us that Achilles was a member of the Achaean army, the very army that had been fighting Hector from the very beginning. So what would prompt him to suddenly show such an act of mercy to such a hated enemy? This is extraordinary and requires some sort of explanation.
Clearly it does. Because if there's one thing historians have to account for, it's plot twists that were written into a story.
Achilles was a man with no mercy, no empathy, who respected nothing other than the threat of force, a man who was willing to leave his comrades to die on a battlefield just to satisfy his pride, a man so hungry for revenge that he continued to abuse his enemy's body after killing him. Yet suddenly, in Book 24 of the Iliad, he's willing to give in to the request of a helpless old man, for no reason other than mercy. Something, and something huge, had to have happened. And the only possible explanation is that Patroclus' ghost taught him compassion, and then the gods ordered him to give the body back.
Something psychologically significant happened to Achilles that made him suddenly decide to stop keeping dead bodies outside his tent. And the only logical explanation for this change is the appearance of Patroclus as attested in all the earliest Greek and Roman sources. Unless you think the Iliad is just badly written fiction in which characters suddenly change their mind for no good reason. But if it's badly written fiction, then why is its account supported by evidence such as a psychological change that clearly came over Achilles? The facts of the Iliad, and of Patroclus' post-mortem appearance in particular, are attested to by witnesses from all sides, including Achaeans, who would have had no motivation to invent or agree to a story about Hector's body being dignified with a funeral, and who would never, ever make up a story in which their hero descends to the level of utter madness that we see following Patroclus' death.
If you're going to make up a story to prove that Patroclus' ghost appeared on the beach, you're not going to claim your eyewitness was a crazy person who was stricken by grief. Therefore, since storytellers never have motivations that we don't fully understand, it's clear the unexpected behaviour of Achilles means that this account isn't fiction, and thus it's logically unavoidable that he was real and that he actually spoke to the ghost of Patroclus.
Moreover, the Romans, who conquered the Greeks and identified as the Trojans' cultural descendants, concur with most of the details of Homer's story.
While they may have tried to explain away Achilles' act of mercy, even the Romans, as self-identified enemies of the Achaeans, don't and apparently can't deny the basic facts surrounding Patroclus' death and reappearance. This is top-drawer corroboration from opposing sides, and never has any account been more multiply attested and independently verified as this one. So unless you want to tell me that 3 different works from 2 separate cultures could possibly draw on the same body of mythology, the conclusion is clear. Ghosts are for real, and Patroclus' shade appeared to Achilles and asked him to bury his body.
And remember, on top of this all, we also have to account for people's behavior as we see it described within the text. Thus it's plain that we have ample evidence that even the most staunch critics simply can't deny, in the form of these 4 simple facts: the death and funeral of Patroclus, the appearance of Patroclus' ghost, the return of Hector's body to Priam, and the fact that people believe this stuff. Starting with the assumptions that these things actually happened, we can use these facts to prove that the Iliad is true, and thus everything in it, including these events, actually happened. So now the question is, what do you do with this information? Well, it's all meaningless unless, like Achilles, you accept Zeus into your heart. Allow him to work in your life so that whenever you kill someone, you can overcome the temptation to mutilate the body beyond human recognition. Also, buy books and movies from us and donate to our ministry.